Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from Wise Witty and Wit. Glad you could be with me for another one of our broadcasts on very important topics. One of the issues which concern me the most is the way by which the right-wing media will often endeavour to create fear and anxiety in all of us around issues which we perhaps should be aware of, certainly, but breeding fear is probably one of those things which we should avoid. However, Sky News tend to celebrate the notion that they are fearmongers, and Alan Jones in particular, I think, with Bolt and others, do exactly the same thing. So what I like to do is just have to take the opportunity every now and again to talk about issues which they have raised, which, if fact-checked, we will discover that they're not exactly the way they're trying to portray it is not actually the reality. So in order to express this, I've got a bit of a video that Sky News put out in relation to it was Alan Jones actually putting out this notion about closures, lockdowns, and the impact that they have on all of us. And they particularly have a view that perhaps lockdowns are unnecessary, that it doesn't really matter about the number of infections that there be in the community, that if those infections increase and become more widespread, that doesn't seem to be of a concern to them, because at the end of the day, the most important thing as far as Sky News are concerned is the damage that this does to our economy, and that people are not able to do what they would be normally doing had there not been a lockdown. And particularly, I think, in this particular case, they're talking about how that affects the poor, the disadvantaged. Now, I do share some concern about the impact that lockdowns do have. Obviously, it is unhelpful in terms of people's mental well-being and people continuing to do whatever it is that they need to do on a daily basis. So I understand all of that. But to fearmonger it and to express it in the way that Sky News do is undermining the impact that coronavirus has on our community, or potentially will have if we allow it to run rampant in our community. And I guess my primary concern is that if these people like Bolt and Jones and Murray and others continue this narrative that they have, that if they were running this country, I would be absolutely devastated at the amount of damage that these morons would do, because they don't seem to have any empathy or understanding about the impact that the virus has on individuals, not only in terms of potential deaths, but also in terms of the long-term effects that this virus has. I remember seeing something recently whereby they were saying someone who had contracted the virus was horrified at the degree to which this was debilitating to them. And we also now know that as a result of the virus, there can be some long-term health consequences. So these issues don't seem to come into the calculation. The fact that in this country we're trying to keep, the politicians are at least trying to keep each of us safe. I appreciate that is a noble cause. That I also noticed that in the UK now they have up to 14,000 new infections per day. With the new spread of the Delta virus, this is likely to increase because it's more infectious. And I just wonder, as those countries open up and America opens up, whether or not they're just going to hit another spike. I think the great advantage that some of these countries have is that they have more people have received the jab than what we have in Australia on a proportion basis, and I think that is an issue for us, and we need to confront that as well. However, here is Andrew Bolt talking about Alan Jones, talking about a bloke that he refers to as Navarro. And I'll just bring you to this point about the first thing that I did was fact check his name. But let's hear what Jones has to say, and then we'll talk about it.
Question that I raised before, and this whole business of lockdowns now. We've got world authorities, including Nobel Prize for this. I want to share this with your opponents.
Whoops, I've got a bit of an echo happening here, so I'll just try and rectify that. If I can figure out where it is. There's a bad echo. I'll try and find that. Oops, don't seem to be able to find it. And I don't know how to sort that out. So I will do what I can to explain what he has said. And I do apologise for anybody that's watching this. So the first thing that he does is he highlights that the name of this person is David Navarro, and I'll just show this clip. This is what so this is the clip which shows what Navarro is saying. His actual name is Navarro with a B, not with a V, so they've misspelt the name to start with. And so that we in the health organisation do not advocate lockdowns as the primary means of control of the virus. That is not, that is actually what he said, but that's not the total story. So Navarro, who's with the World Health Organization, which incidentally, they were, Sky News were criticising at some particular point that they were critical of the World Health Organizations and their involvement in the virus and their assessment of the virus in the first place. And here they are, and they were critical of Navarro at one particular point sometime last year. And here they are using him as a means by which they can discuss his comments, because his comments now fit with what it is that they were, it fits kind of now with their narrative. And I find this fascinating because at one point they felt they could criticise him because it didn't fit, and now they're celebrating him because they believe that it does. I had another audio of an interview with Navarro, which where he explains this criticism that he's now got because he's been misquoted, he will say, in terms of the virus. So here he's saying, we in the health organisation do not advocate lockdowns as the primary means of control of the virus. So what Navarro talks about is the use of other means by which we should control virus. Vaccinations obviously is one of them, and also better control of people coming into countries. So quarantine facilities are really important as well, according to him. So there's a whole range of things that should sit around our management of COVID-19 as opposed to just doing lockdowns. Now, he says that lockdowns are important, though, because they help people to get up to pace with the controlling of the virus. So contact tracing, for example, is really important, and he lists all the things that are important. He says that if all those things are in place, then lockdowns won't be as necessary as what we're now implementing. But lockdowns are still important. But people like Bold and Jones will say that lockdowns are ineffective. That's not what Navarro is saying. Number one, they got his name wrong. Number two, they misunderstood what he had said. Now, later on in this, I wish I could play the whole lot, but I don't know why my audio is stuffed. But at the end of the day, he also, Alan Jones also talks about what's happening in Singapore. And I thought it was, so he's brought up Singapore as an example of how they've been able to control the virus. And I thought that was an interesting thing to look at because, is Singapore comparative to Australia? Well, no, it isn't. I did have the population. I can't remember what it was now. I think it was 14 million or something. But so 14 million people live in Singapore. Now, how does Singapore compare to Australia? Is it comparing apples with apples, or is it comparing something else? Well, it's totally different, because as you will see on this particular map, the green part is Singapore, and this is a comparison with Tasmania. Now, I think that when we compare these two, we can see that there's a lot of people compacted into a very small area compared to just the example of Tasmania. Now, if we extrapolate that to Australia, Singapore is a really tiny place. Now, clearly, it is easier to be able to maintain a control over that smaller area and to limit the spread of COVID-19 in this compacted area, even though the population is around 14 million people. So to compare what they're doing in Singapore and how they're able to control it with a country the mass of even Tasmania, let alone Australia, is unreasonable and bizarre. But that's what Sky News do. They take one example and they try to fit it with the Australian experience, and the two just don't match up. No matter which way you look at it, it's not going to work. But they need it to fit with their narrative. As I said before, I think it's really important to understand that every country is different. What they're doing in the US is completely different to here. And there was another clip somewhere where Alan Jones talks about what they're doing. His hero is at the moment DeSantis in Florida, the governor of Florida, and he starts talking about way they're opening it up and what all that means. Well, actually, the reality is that in the US, the virus is still spreading, but it's just not being reported anymore because it's not on the massive scale that it was 5-6 months ago. And so it just doesn't seem to be hitting the news. I watch a lot of MSNBC and CNN and Fox News, and it's no longer present in the media because, as a country, they're becoming more and more vaccinated, which is something we're not doing. So therefore, the number of vaccinations seems to be more important, and there don't seem to be the extent of the deaths that they have, even though they're up to over 604,000 deaths in the US. And the other thing I think that really distresses me is the way here in Australia some of these right-wing medias are minimising what has happened, because even though we've had something like 900 odd deaths, and I think 600 of those deaths have occurred in Victoria because that's where the major outbreaks have been, they're minimising the fact that there have been deaths, but they will minimise it further by stating that there has only been one death this year, and that came from someone from Asia, I believe, came to Australia, had the virus, and consequently passed away. And so, but if we'd not done the lockdowns, if we'd not done all the things that we're doing right now in order to minimise that figure would have been much, much greater. So they don't look at things in the context as to which they're happening. They want to present a narrative which suggests that whatever the government is doing is wrong. And one of the other fascinating things, I'll just conclude on this, is that they are also, at the moment, they're becoming very critical of the Liberal Party, particularly in New South Wales, where they've implemented some sort of temporary lockdown, and the Morrison government because of the lack of vaccinations. So at some point, though, to their credit, they're starting to become a little bit more critical of right-wing politicians than they have been in the past, which is a good thing to see, I think. So that's my thoughts on where we stand in relation to Sky News, again, getting it completely wrong, because they must find something that fits the narrative that is about who they are, I guess, which is right-wing politics, and not being able to present the full facts, and that they believe that they have the all-encompassing panacea to the problem, that they know and understand the way things should be, but they never offer any adequate solutions. They're highly critical of what is happening, but they are unrealistic in the way they view it, as is the example of Singapore and how that fits within the context of Australia. So thanks for being with me on Wise, Witty and Weird. Great that you could be here, and looking forward to you subscribing to us and ringing the bell so that you can get further notifications in the future. So thanks everybody for being with us. Take care, look after yourself and be safe.